There's a technique in kind of sports and physical training, or a set of techniques really, to do with either visualisation or some kind of internal modelling of the action you want to do, or of the adopting and I guess kind of meditation on some kind of visual image which is supposed to help you with the activity you're carrying out. So, for example, in tennis, you have this thing called the inner game. There's a quite well-known book called the inner game of tennis, where if you want to improve your serve, for example, you watch someone who you can do it correctly. You watch that person do that serve, and then you visualise yourself doing it over and over again, and you really try to nail the visual image of the serve. And that's what that's supposed to do. Is it's supposed to provide an internal kind of schematic map of the serve that you would want to do. So when you do it, your own body is kind of being influenced by the visual image. It's providing a template for the action. On a more detailed note, and not quite so obviously representative of the body, in some physical practices, something like Alexander technique, which is a kind of body alignment technique that a lot of singers use, for example, but also people like dancers use it, and people who are doing any kind of physical activity. In Alexander technique, again, there's a series of visual images. There's physical things you do with your body, kind of live, but there are also visual images that you adopt to try to, again, act as templates to organise and structure the movements of the body. The one that I'm just reminded of now, it's years ago since I did Alexander, but one that you do which is you imagine your head being like a ball, and then you imagine it spinning forwards like that, and then you imagine it moving upwards, kind of at 70 degrees towards the corner of the room. So you set it spinning, and then you imagine it spinning forwards like that. And what that does is it provides a visual image, a completely non-realistic visual image, but it's a visual image which helps to structure what's happening in that case, in your head and neck. It's supposed to coordinate certain movements to do with and muscle groups in certain particularly helpful and healthy ways in Alexander technique. So I think the logic of both those, and probably the second one is the clearest example, I think the logic of that is that your head is quite a complex object, a very heavy piece of meat, really, and the muscles supporting the neck and the bone supporting the head, and the bones at the back of the neck, and all the muscles around the jaw, and all the rest of the stuff that's going on. It's fairly complex, and if you had to think about moving all that lot in a healthy way by focusing on each muscle group and on each vertebrae and on getting the balance right and all those different things, you probably wouldn't be able to do it because there's just too much to think about. When you're focusing on one muscle group, something else is going out of whack and so on. So you can't really focus on those things. And also the details of each of those different components of that move are quite subtle, really. So you might not even be able to get to the detail of that. So the way that you solve both those problems, the problem of complexity and the problem of detail, is by getting this image, which is, in this case, it's a completely non-realistic image, as I say. You get this image of a ball, imagine it going in motion, and imagine it doing something. And what that effectively does is it organises it for you. It structures that complex series of movements across, as I say, a series of muscle groups and skeletal structures, which would otherwise be quite difficult to do. Okay. Why am I talking about that? Oh yeah, well, I've heard that referred to as organising proprioception. This chap in Liverpool, I can't remember his name now, he did some writing about Tai Chi and Qigong and why that is quite useful to certain athletes or certain people in the performing arts, that kind of thing. And what he was saying is that it organises proprioception. Proprioception being the coordinating and spatially organising senses that we have in our bodies, which normally is just completely intuitive. We don't think about what our bodies are doing when we're walking or when we're just doing stuff, with the implication that we could in many ways be doing them less efficiently than we might need to if we were doing those things professionally. So something like Tai Chi and Qigong, he says, organises that proprioception. It allows us to coordinate these small movements, allow us to gain some kind of control and some degree of excellence in how to do that coordination and that detailed movement. Okay, so let me just recap before I move on to the next bit. So one way to organise a complex series of physical activities into a single coordinated overall action is by constructing some kind of schema, mental schema for them, which acts as a template and does that organisation for you coherently and consistently, so you don't have to dwell on each individual detail separately. Okay. So what I'm thinking of, is there a kind of conceptual or philosophical or moral correlate for that? Are there mental constructs which organise moral choices, philosophical choices, conceptual ideas, which organise those in the same way that a visual schema organises our physical activity? Would it be possible to think about a set of, not exactly images, but a set of a single conceptual entity which acted as a template and guided our choices in all of these different moral areas, different philosophical areas? So we didn't have to keep dwelling on each one individually and working out the detail of each one individually. In the same way, you don't have to dwell on working out the individual actions of your jaw muscles when you're trying to sing. I suppose some philosophies do that, and I suppose some ideologies do that. But I'm guessing that probably some kind of religious and spiritual stories do that. I know that whole thing about what's it called? The "What would Jesus do?" That whole thing is a bit cheesy, and there's no real credibility. But I can kind of imagine something like that acting as a conceptual template for action. If you kind of imagine something like Jesus or a saint or an angel inside your head, and you've got quite a coherent understanding of what that means. You don't need to flesh out the details when you think about it, you just kind of know what that means, in the same way that you know what a ball flying towards the corner of the room is. Once you've got that, then that could act as a shaping device, as a template which influences all of these little decisions that you're making. You wouldn't have to believe it. That's the key thing. When you do this Alexander technique, ball flying towards the corner of the room exercise, you don't really believe your head is turned into a ball. You absolutely don't. You just have to get the image, and you kind of have to give the image some authority. You have to take it seriously. You know what I mean? You can't be ironic about your head turning into a ball, otherwise it doesn't have any physical effect. You can't be ironic about Tai Chi and Qigong, otherwise it doesn't organise your proprioception. You have to kind of submit to it and do it seriously. But belief doesn't come into it. There's no belief in there. It's irrelevant. And I suppose if I was going to think more about the "What would Jesus do?" or any of the other kind of analogies or any other models you could construct from that, again, you wouldn't need to believe it for it to work. You would just need to submit to its authority, or you would just need to take it seriously. I guess if you took it seriously, then it would organise and schematise your moral and ethical and philosophical choices. Yeah, that's